So hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. I'm pretty excited about this today. We've got a panel of amazing athletes that are going to share their story, and I know I'm excited to hear about it. I hope those of you guys in the audience or watching the recording later are as excited as I am. I'm Amy Rusiecki. If you don't know me, I'm the race director of the Vermont 100 and of Beast Coast Trail Races. And specifically today, we're talking to a bunch of athletes who are gearing up for this year's Vermont 100, and they all are athletes with disabilities. And so they're all going to share a little bit about their story and what that means, and kind of how their journey is sometimes the same and sometimes different than what my journey might be going towards a race. And generally, we're hoping this is going to be a conversation. So if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the question and answer. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask a question, or if you have an experience that you want to share as well. Certainly, I know there's people in the audience that also have some valuable experience to share. Let's see. I think that's all the nuts and bolts. Before we super dive into it, I've got like a couple of Vermont 100 reminders for folks. One is the runner's handbook. Check that out on the website. It'll be updated for this year by the 4th of July weekend, but you can use last year's for a lot of, just to kind of understand the race rules or kind of some of the basics. If you haven't submitted your volunteer or qualifier information, you're now officially on my naughty list. You will be getting emails from me, so please submit those sooner rather than later. I think those were the quick updates that I was going to give. I don't know if our last panelist is here yet. So I am going to have us, I'm going to have us all do, sorry, okay. I'm going to have us all do quick introductions. So I'd love everyone on the panel, share your name, preferred pronouns if you want to share that, which race you're going to be conquering this year at the Vermont 100. And if my question of the day is, if you could run anywhere in the world, where would it be? So John, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I'm John Harawi. I'm doing the 100 miler this year in Vermont. I'm whatever pronoun, just he, I guess. And if I could run anywhere, it would be Petra in Jordan. They have a marathon. So that's at least the one I talk about the most.
Great. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison Roy. I'm also running the 100-mile race. And if I could run anywhere, I've always wanted to run the Great Wall race that they do, Great Wall of China race.
Excellent. Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben Szymanski. I'm running the 100-mile race as well. And anywhere, just anywhere in the Caribbean. I just like being able to jump right into the ocean.
Excellent. Alex?
I'm Alex Schaefer. I'm going to be doing the 100-mile race. I am here just helping Amy out with the question and answer section, the chat, and also listen to these awesome athletes. So hoping I can gain something from their experiences too. I have a couple finishes, couple DNFs at Vermont, so always more to learn. And if I could run anywhere, I guess I would go to somewhere maybe like Switzerland.
Excellent. And Kim?
Hey everybody, I'm Kim Jackson. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. And we are gratefully the beneficiary of all of your running and fundraising for this event. I am absolutely not running anything because I don't run, but I will be cheering you all on at Lillian's aid station, which is around mile 47-ish. And I wouldn't choose to run anywhere in the world, but if I could hike anywhere in the world, which I love to do, which it would be Tibet.
Excellent. Thank you. And so I'm going to give a brief introduction, and we're going to pass it to Kim for a few minutes and then talk to these amazing athletes. So Kim Jackson, like she said, she's from Vermont Adaptive. And that's, you know, I mean, Vermont Adaptive is Vermont 100, you know, and so, you know, it's, I don't even know. Yeah, Kim will talk more about how awesome Vermont Adaptive is. But I'll say, like, some of the things that I'm really proud of is, you know, as a sign of our commitment to Vermont Adaptive, we're proud that several years ago, Vermont 100 was the first trail race and ultra race to officially recognize athletes with disabilities at our race, which is something that was very common in the, you know, kind of major road marathons, but really wasn't seen on the trail and ultra scene. And it kind of warms our heart to see how many races now have adopted it. If you look carefully at their rules, sometimes they still have a reference to Camp 10 Bear in there or something that shows you that they stole Vermont's language and adapted it, which is great, you know. But we're also excited that, you know, as part of that, it means this year we've got the largest and most competitive group of athletes with disabilities towing the line next month, several of which are here, but we're really excited about that. So Kim's going to talk a little bit about Vermont Adaptive. So thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Amy. Were you able to tee up that video or no?
I did, so I can,
Okay, so
whenever you're ready.
so just quickly, obviously Vermont Adaptive is super grateful for this event. Laura Farrell, who is the founder of the Vermont 100, is also the founder of Vermont Adaptive. And she created the race, I don't even, how many years now? I don't even know. What are we at? Are we at 30 something, right?
Yeah, we're in the 30s. It's
Yeah.
hard with the COVID years, but I
Yeah.
think the first year was 1991
Yeah.
or
So
89.
she
Anyway,
established
a
the
while ago.
event to support the organization. And so it's always been near and dear, obviously, to the organization's heart as one of our framework events that we rely on every year for our operating budget, and which is approaching close to 2 million. And what we do is year-round programs for people of any ability. So folks with physical disabilities, neurodiverse disabilities, cognitive, developmental, emotional, behavioral. Basically, anyone is welcome to come and recreate with us, and we never turn away anyone based on their ability to pay, which is a biggie because some of the things that we do could be expensive, like skiing. If you wanted to do a whole day of skiing with equipment and a lesson, it could get up there. But the scholarship we do, let's see, last winter we did about 150,000 just winter alone in scholarships. So the fundraising that you folks do goes towards that. It also goes towards buying expensive adaptive equipment, which could mean a sit ski or a monoski, which can be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. Actually, they're even more, I think, these days. And an adaptive mountain bike can range anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. So the equipment that we have is very expensive. The fleet of equipment that we have, because we access all points in Vermont statewide, we travel with trucks and trailers, is very vast. So because we want to get as many people outside and enjoying and playing and doing what we love here in the mountains, that fundraising is key. And if hopefully the video goes, I think the video kind of says it all. I'm happy to answer any questions when we get into that panel part of things, but the video, I think, really tells the story of why you're running and who you're running for and why it makes a difference for us and for the people we serve.
Great. So I'm going to try to share my screen here for a sec. Can you guys see this? Thumbs up. Yes. Okay.
When you get a disability that takes away things that you think you're going to have your whole life, it's really hard to figure out how anything's going to make you happy again, or how anything's going to give you purpose or meaning. And to have this fun aspect of sliding on snow and growing as a person, regardless of if my legs work or not, is something that makes you want to live. It literally saved who I was.
We all live in a beautiful land here in the state of Vermont, and we get outside and we play every single day, and everybody deserves to play. And that's what Vermont Adaptive is. It's an opportunity, it's an experience for folks to get out and and see what Vermont has to offer. The one thing that these volunteers and the athletes and everybody share in common is the love of the outdoors. It's just being outside with the wind in your face and feeling the speed or feeling the water, or feeling, you know, the woods and the smells. That's what it's all about.
Down by the bay, where the watermelons grow, back to my home. I want to be outside because I don't want to sit at home a lot. I want to stay active. I look forward to going kayaking and canoeing every week. I like hanging out with the Vermont Adaptive people when I am paddling. It makes for an awesome day. When I'm out there on the kayak, good luck trying to keep up.
We try to make sure everybody has equal opportunities to get outside and recreate. Whether they have a cognitive disability, a physical disability, or anything that's challenging them where they want to just be in the outdoors with everybody else. We have the technical equipment and the people to help make it possible.
The staff and volunteers are one of the most dedicated group of people I've worked with. Vermont Adaptive gives them a way to kind of keep honing in their skills and working with athletes to become better teachers and be more knowledgeable about the sport. My goal is treat the person as a person, getting them out riding on the trails with the least adaptations as possible, providing them with the most independence and freeing ability they can.
To adapt means to change a thing and make it work for me. I cannot run fast, so I can go fast on wheels. I felt more free without person holding me back and saying, whoa, slow down. I can actually go fly down a hill at my own speed. I love that Vermont Adaptive is here to support kids like me.
Everybody plays the same. We just need to make some changes so that we can all play in the same zone. Safety is a pretty integral part of what it is that we do. But we also want to make sure that there's a lot of fun involved because they are putting a lot of trust in us. If you're somebody who's going out paddling for the first time and you're afraid of water, you really need to be able to see that your peers are having a good time and that there's nothing to be scared of. It's a little thing, but in the big picture, it's really what makes it so that people are able to get out and push the limits and get a little further than just the spot that they're in.
As someone who grew up skiing, I always look at myself as a skier first. And now I'm happen to be a skier who is visually impaired. I'm incredibly proud and happy that through Vermont Adaptive, I'm able to continue to do something that I love, but more importantly, something that I love to do with my family and friends. It's also really important for me to know that my daughter is able to see me doing what I love to do with a little bit of support from someone else. And I would always rather be out on the hill challenging myself. And I think that's the opportunity that Vermont Adaptive provides. We know that it has not only an impact on me as an athlete, but also my family, which is incredible.
Whether it's exceeding their ability or doing what they can do or needing assistance from somebody, you're outside. What does it matter what you're accomplishing? If there's people who want to be competitive, I'll be your biggest cheerleader, you know, making sure you can take the next move.
Vermont Adaptive is this amazing community that just brings you in from day one. I got assigned to a volunteer named Norm Stoughton. He didn't see my disability. He only considered what I could do. From there, everything was possibility. My goal was to be a high-level athlete again, and he looked at me and said, "You can do that." That community is really what makes you want to stay and makes you want to keep working with everybody. It's also what drives Vermont Adaptive forward. I think there's often a barrier for people to get involved because they don't know somebody with what they consider a disability. So I think it's really important for them to realize that you're not just giving to an athlete, you're really sharing your talent with the person. It doesn't matter if they have a disability or not. It's to give, to care, to teach. It's all a very human thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
I'm
Every
watching
time I
that.
see that, it's always so, it gets me so excited.
I haven't watched it in a while, and I know Kyle is on this call, and Lucy was really young, so I'm wondering if we need to update this.
I was
But
thinking
it's
that
just-
too. That's how
I know.
that's how long we know that
Yeah.
this was. Kyle, one of the, for those of you guys watching, one of the athletes that was featured there, Kyle is
Yeah.
running the 100K this summer.
Yeah.
So is also a Vermont 100 athlete. So
Yeah, so as the video starts out, you have a monoskier, and then you have a woman in a kayak, and then you have a teenage boy on a mountain bike, and then we have Kyle alpine skiing, and then back to fun faces, having a great time in the outdoors, community, volunteers, staff. It's just I love that video because I do think it sums up kind of who we are and why we're here. We also have about 400 volunteers, and we couldn't do our programs without that. There's only 15 of us on staff. So the programs that we do are all run by our highly trained volunteers. We put them through training both in the winter and the summer. So anybody's welcome to volunteer. We're always looking for folks to do that as well. And the other big thing is our veterans program. We do serve folks in the military or veterans, and all of our programs for that are free as well. So we can get, vets who might have PTSD, or they may have a physical disability, or just looking for that safe space to come out and enjoy the outdoors. So yeah, I mean, I can take questions when we get to that point, but Amy, unless there's something else, that's who we are.
no, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that's helpful even just to kind of set the stage for who Vermont Adaptive is and why there's this connections or the connection with the race. So thank you. Those of you guys that are watching in the audience, feel free, I kind of threw something in the chat, but feel free to tell us who you are, where you would run if you could run anywhere in the world. And then if you're running Vermont 100 or maybe volunteering or having some other, doing something at Vermont 100, feel free to throw that in the chat as well, just so we know who you are. And then the other thing, before, I know, panelists, we're going to get to you in one sec. As Kim was talking, we do a lot of fundraising, and a lot of athletes that are running the Vermont 100 take on the challenge, the additional challenge beyond running the 100K or 100 miler to do fundraising, which is amazing. We'd like to, as kind of have this panel discussion here, kick off. We're trying to make a push over the next week. We'd like to fundraise enough to purchase a mono ski rig and a hand crank cycle, which are two of the big items that Kim talked about. And again, to paint the picture, a mono ski rig, like she said, that's about 10 grand. And you think about, if I wanted to go out and ski, I may be spending $1,000 on equipment. And for somebody who needs a mono ski, that's that additional financial barrier just for them to be able to hit the slopes. And so that's why it's important for Vermont Adaptive to have them. And then a hand crank cycle, that's also 16 grand. So we're hopeful that throughout the next week, we can make a push to fundraise 26 grand to buy one of each, to allow Vermont Adaptive to buy one of each. And so I ask each of you guys that are watching to just think about if there are people that you can ask to maybe donate a few dollars. If everybody that's participating in the race can donate or can fundraise $60 in the next week, that gets us to our goal. So it's not huge numbers for everyone, but hopefully folks can help us reach that goal. So anyway, now we're going to hear from the amazing athletes that are here. So I'd love to just go around. We can go around in the same order that you guys introduced yourselves. And I'd love if each of you guys could just talk a little bit about what your disability is and how it impacts your running. So we're going to just dive right in. So John, do you want to kick that off?
Sure. So again, I'm John, and I have multiple sclerosis. I've had that since I was a teenager, kind of an early diagnosis back in the day. I think it's more commonplace because of imaging is so well available. And it affects my day to day differently every day. And then when it comes to, I guess, running, I say I'm just falling with style, not so much running, just trying to prevent falling to the ground. And I still will deny that I'm a runner. I just think I'm a very fast hiker, which works well for the 100-mile or the ultra distances because if I'm in a 50K, I finish in the very last. In the 50-miler, I do okay. In the 100-miler, I do a little better. So I've noticed that I just am consistent with the gait that I have, and that's all I can work on. So.
Excellent. Allison?
Hi, I'm Allison again. I'm a visually impaired runner. I don't have a diagnosis. They're not really sure what's going on with my eyes. We've located the genetic discrepancy that I have, but where they've never seen it before. So it's kind of it's a surprise grab bag of what's going to happen to my eyes over the next couple of years. And I've just leaned into radical acceptance. But what it's doing is affecting my central vision. So my rod and cone cells in the central area of my vision are dying. And so I have to rely quite a bit on my peripheral vision. And my depth perception's pretty terrible. So running on trails is definitely a challenge, especially in New England where they're not so kind with the rocks and roots and the leaves. And so I just see it as a bonus challenge. But yeah, and then I like the way John said it. It kind of impacts my day-to-day differently every day, depending on what I'm doing and how I'm feeling. Yeah, just, what the task is for that day.
Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben. I am visually impaired. My diagnosis is Stargardt. Like Allison, mine is much more common, but it affects my central vision where my cones and rods are dying. So I also, like Allison, I feel like I'm going to repeat a lot of what my buddy Allison has just said. I rely on my peripheral. Roots are like the anti-me, and I have tons of scars all over my hands from getting up close and personal with them. And I like Allison, follow it as an extra challenge.
Excellent. And then I'd love each of you three to share a running accomplishment that you're most proud of. So Allison, I don't know if you want to go first.
I'll go first. This one just happened. I decided very last minute to do Manchester Monadnock again because I can't help myself. I love that race. It's a 50-ish mile race, Manchester, New Hampshire to Mount Monadnock and then up and down Monadnock, which is the challenging part for me for sure. And I came in first place female, which was really exciting. So yeah, I've been second place for the past couple of years. So always the bridesmaid, never the bride, but that happened this year. So I was really, really pumped. And I won on the mountain, which for me was a really cool accomplishment because, that part's hard for me. So yeah, it's a cool day.
Excellent. Ben.
The most recent one I had was at Notch View out there in the Berkshires. I came in first place and set the course record out there. And I did it alone for most of it. I mean, other than the time that Amy actually scared the ever-loving hell out of me. Just so you know, Amy.
Just say you weren't alone. I'm sure I joined you for a little bit.
Absolutely, but I was like, it was pitch dark, and you poked me, and I was like, oh God, it absolutely terrified me. But yeah, that was the one. It was kind of fun.
Excellent. And John.
I wouldn't have to say a race in particular, but all of them, because I'm just amazed that I can even do it. To finish one is a big deal. Because with like my disease, it's not a constant thing. It changes day to day, and I have different setbacks. And so like tomorrow's race isn't guaranteed. And so the most I can do is just show up and hope I get it done. And So every time I actually finish one, let alone I never place, but as long as I can finish it, I'm ecstatic, like it's the first time all over again. And that's what's exciting about doing this Vermont, because that's the speed that's what's required in this one for that 30-hour mark has kind of been like an Everest for me to try to work on that pace. And so yeah, all of them and all the ones I've passed, and especially the DNFs, those are kind of the best memory for me. I learned the most because I was getting a little cocky with like 9 finished in a row. I was like, yes, I'm doing great. Nothing's gonna stop me. And then I hit a wall, you know. And so it's been quite a year because I'm still in my first year of racing or running or any of this. And so it's I'm just looking forward to what's next. So I'll answer that question after Vermont.
That's great. Yeah, your greatest running accomplishment could still be ahead of you. I'd love to dive in a little bit about like what training looks like for you guys. So this is, I guess you guys can just kind of answer. I won't necessarily call on you, but what does training look for you? And like, how is it maybe the same as how I might train for an ultra, and how is it different?
So I'll jump in there. So for me, I obviously I don't have a license. So I use running as part of my day-to-day transportation. So I run to work, I run home, I run the same routes every day, and then if I need to alter it, I'll usually grab a buddy and do that. So my training is my day-to-day. I think that's kind of the interesting part. So I never really pay too much attention to the miles I run because it's so consistent. And then I just will alter it. So I think Amy, you and I have talked about it where you'll have more of a plan in place. And for me, I have this just consistency and then alter around my son's baseball schedule or whatever it is to get those extra miles in.
John or Allison, do you guys want to talk about this?
Yeah, I think I stick mostly to the road, and I do. I stick mostly to the road, similar routes. I have friends that will pull me into the trails, which is always nice to give me that confidence. And then my husband's also an ultra runner, and so I've got a built-in pacer right here at home, which is kind of nice and convenient. And then a lot of the training I actually do is hiking with my family. My kids are little power hikers, so they're working on their 48. They have 36 of their 48 4,000 footers here in New Hampshire done. And so a lot of my training is with my family, and that's really nice too, that we just get to be out there together.
John, I don't know if you want to answer it or if you want me to go to the next question.
No, yeah, I guess for me is I don't really have a training plan. I just like time on my feet. And I'm lucky to live at the base of San Gorgonio, which is the tallest mountain here in SoCal at 11,500 feet. And so we're in the foothills of that. So I just can walk out the door and be on trail. So it's not hard to get 1,000 or 3,000 feet gain within a couple of miles, just depending on what trail route I want to go. And I kind of just stick to the same exact route, the same consistency, because then I can gauge how I'm doing, how I feel each day compared to the last. And then like, if I'm not running day, if it's a rest day, I'm just rowing, like an hour to 3 hours of rowing, which I think that's a rest day. And most people think that's a little much. But that's kind of just, I've done that for years and years. Traveled the country with my rowing machine in the car, like just to set it up and to keep the rowing going. But yeah, other than that, it's just time on my feet. I don't have a training plan other than I try to do as many 50Ks as I can, because that's the only time. Like, I'm not going to go out and just run a 50K on my own. I have to like spend money on it, and then it forces me to do it. So it's just consistency and dedication to it to keep the neural pathways there. Because I'm always scared to stop, that if I do take a true like rest or a break, that I'm not going to be able to do it the next day. And so it gets a little exhausting sometimes, but it's all in the sport. So
And you guys have talked about this a little bit, but as you three kind of think about the Vermont 100, are there certain aspects of the course that are the biggest challenge for you?
Those rolling hills, they're frightening me.
Okay, and why so?
Because like out in the West Coast, we have like big peaks, like big individual climbs, and then they might plateau and might do some rolling down, but it's not so much like up and down and up and down, because how do you make a pace for yourself
Yeah.
when it's constantly changing? And then like my weakness is the downhill. Like I love incline, but I get scared of falling on the downhill, so I fight gravity, and I always lose a lot of time going down the hills. So for me out here, it's hard to like get in hill practice, so I end up just running up the same side of a hill a bunch of times and turning around and running down it, and that's the only way I can kind of simulate a rolling hill. But other than that, it's just that gets into my head a little bit about that. How do you calculate the pace for that?
Yeah. Oh, you can't. I kind of talk about sometimes how the Vermont 100 course, like people want to see an elevation profile, and I'm like, it looks like somebody having a heart attack. Like you're not going to really gain much by looking at an elevation. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts is what it is. You know, it's not one big climb. It's just 1,000 small climbs. So you're right, John. That's certainly an aspect that a lot of people, it intimidates a lot of people. Alice and Ben, is there anything
Yeah,
big challenge?
last 10 miles are terrible. Because it's dark and there's roots, and every root seems to want to hang out with me. And I don't like it, and it makes me mad, and I say bad words, and then I immediately say to Amy, like, how did you do this? And then she immediately says, you know, I did this because of you, and I made sure that we put those extra roots there. So I'm convinced it's very personal, and I understand that this, but no, but the last 10 miles, because, you know, because I'm not flying like Allison, so I'll be in the darkness. I'm just joking, Allison. I know you're gonna see some of those routes too, but you see those routes at night, and you're inevitably gonna miss some of them.
Ben, is it harder to run by headlamp? Just given your vision, and then you add the headlamp to it? Like, I'm guessing there's kind of more to it with that, right?
You know, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, I hate my headlamp. I genuinely hate it. It's the worst thing in the entire world. Part of my thing is like my eyes don't adjust to the light very well, so the headlamp, it gives me a massive headache, and then you spend hours trying to get past it. So for me, I always pray that it'll be kind of that whoever is guiding me doesn't look backward. It doesn't feel like they need to make eye contact with me when we're running, and then I just lock into their calves and run following their calves. Also, just kind of a little Easter egg here, and then I judge their calf muscles. Right
I was gonna
there.
say no BBCs there.
No PVCs there. That's
You don't like following my husband?
not for nothing.
Awesome. Allison, how about for you?
So I mean, yeah, Ben and I are in very similar worlds. I mean, I think nighttime's my kryptonite. So I try to, you know, sometimes some of my strategy is to go faster when I have the daylight, because I know that I'm gonna naturally slow down when it's dark. And I don't know about for you, Ben, but those cusp hours, dusk and dawn, are actually the worst for me, because the headlamp the light isn't all that helpful, but for me, it's automatically even darker than it is for everybody else, and my eyes aren't adjusting well. Especially same kind of phenomenon happens, and Ben and I have talked about this too, when you leave the road sometimes and go into the woods, which is darker, and I have a harder time adjusting there too. So there's definitely some times when that becomes more challenging. And again, what I try to do is kind of pace faster when I can, and then use those times to recover a little bit, knowing that that's going to happen naturally. So, and I've tried every form of light. I hate my headlamp so much. I've tried the waistbands, I've tried the knuckle, I've tried like someone invents like the magical light that will help us, that'd be great.
So I gotta say that I had a guy, the last one, he's a great guy, and he had one of those, like, I don't know, one of these things that was on Facebook that had the crazy blinky insane colors. And he's like, he had it on, and he's like, just follow this. And I was like, dude, if you don't take that off.
Yeah.
there's going to be some crimes committed today, man.
Oh, boy. Um, Thanks, Ben. Now that we got
Ben-
that on video,
Ben's
that's
making it so that
recorded
everyone's
for
going to want to
posterity.
pace Ben.
He
Everyone's
was
going to
way
want to guide
faster.
and pace Ben.
There was no way that I could ever catch him. It was Max. Max, he's an insane runner.
Excellent. Okay, circling back again. I'm just curious if any of you guys have kind of talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious just how your disability impacts your approach to the race. Like I don't know. Or does it?
I got to tell you, I run a lot, and then I just wave at things, and I find that I know this really doesn't answer the question, but I feel like it should be known. So it affects me because, I wave at stop signs, and people don't know, because I just assume it's a person, because you get like this like image. I think my disability just makes me laugh. Somebody was like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, really, you shouldn't be, because like I just assume everybody's smiling and in a great place. So if you've ever run with me, I'm always pretty positive and pretty energetic. So for me, I don't hate it. I mean, I hate it when I'm bleeding because my hands are ripped apart and my toes are messed up, but said every runner ever. So yeah, I don't hate my disability. I kind of embrace it pretty strong. But I do have to throw a shout out to Kyle, because Kyle Robideau, who you saw in that video, I sing his praises because he's the guy that convinced me, like, don't run away from it. And his impeccable guidance and expert guidance led me to a place where it is, I've embraced it so much that I think it has made me love running that much more. I didn't use it as a crutch. It was like my therapy, I think, when I first was diagnosed. But it's become, just through Kyle's guidance, I guess is my choppy way of saying it's become something much more. So my disability is made me a better runner, I guess.
Yeah, Ben, I was telling Amy before you popped on that that's what you did for me in the first team call that we had, for sure. You inspired me to just really embrace it and lean into it, because I felt like I was straddling two worlds for a really long time. And so I think this past year has been really enlightening in that way. So and just to kind of, go along with what you said, the first time I ran a 100-miler, I was like, is that a hallucination, or is that just because I see things all the time that aren't there? So I'm like, that tree is actually it's not a person, it's actually a tree. So yeah, it's just, you gotta laugh. If you don't, you cry. So just really lean into it.
So kind of on that note, Allison, I'm wondering if you can just kind of share a little bit of, like, you have been signed up for Vermont 100 before and not check the box to say, hey, I'm a visually impaired athlete. And this year you did. And so I'm curious if you can just kind of talk a little bit about that, the thought process, or maybe the emotions involved with officially saying, yes, this is who I am.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary in a way, but then it feels really, it really feels good after you do it. And I think, again, I think it was hard for me to decide which world I belonged in. And because I can still drive. I can still drive during the day. I can't drive at night. Although that's probably, we're probably coming to the end of that. But, I think sometimes I felt like, where do I belong? And then so I had signed up as a not an athlete with a disability last year. And then shortly after that, because I joined the team and I met Ben and I heard his story. And so when it came time to sign up this year, I thought, this is time. It's time for me to embrace this part of me and be really just in that world. And I think, as Ben said, I think running has been my therapy, and really leaning into that and leaning into not shying away from it, because there are days where I get really frustrated, or I really just want to go out on a trail run by myself and I don't have the confidence. And so, I think being encouraged to still get out there and do it in the way that I know best how to do it, and that sometimes the training doesn't have to exactly match the terrain of what you're doing. It's a lot of that mental aspect too. And I think my disability has made me mentally tough for sure. Definitely. So yeah, lots of mixed emotions, but I think now having clicked the button, I feel like just so good. Like I feel like it's right. It was time. So yeah.
John,
Yeah,
I know your story less, but I don't know if you had a similar journey in terms of, you know, putting it out there. Hey, you know, I'm living with MS and I've got some challenges that I need to deal with, or
well, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I had to use canes to walk into my early 20s. And so it was kind of more, I wasn't invisible. It was a much more visible disease. And so everyone would focus on that and pity you for it. A lot of people would always end up staring at like your feet. So I would wear like flamboyant shoes because everyone would always be like looking at my feet instead of at me. And years of physical therapy and learning how to walk again, and then never wanting to stop, and walking turned to hiking, and hiking turned to this. I kind of liked being invisible to it. I mean, anyone that knows me and is around me more than like maybe an hour is like, okay, he's got some issues, because I fall sitting down. I'm in a lot of pain, so I always have like that resting asshole face. But it's just like I'm just like in pain, and it's like nothing personal to anyone else, or like my mood might not match like what's going on. And I'm like always cold, and I have a bad headache, and I just have issues, and then I stumble and my gait's off. But if I'm just standing still, I look pretty okay. But it's like anytime anything comes in. So being able to do this, I felt like I was just like anyone else competing when it first started.
Yeah.
And I kind of loved that about it. And this is the first race where I was like openly upfront about like, hey, I have MS. And I did instantly regret it. Like I had that, like after it was like official and I had signed up for the race, and I talked to you, Amy, because remember, I was like, I think it's like the day of the lottery. I was like, oh, by the way. And you're like, yeah, thank you for letting me know. We'll pull your name. I did regret it. Like I did have like a crisis of identity with it, because it's like, is that what I want to be the poster of? Like, I just wanted to be like everyone else. And I felt that that was kind of defining it. But I realized that it's nothing to be like ashamed of. And if it can just help one other person that has like a disability, or even has multiple sclerosis, where your whole future is spelled out in front of you by a doctor who's just reading from a clipboard, like that they can be so much more than just letters on a piece of paper, then it is worth it. Like, because at least something good comes from it that's more selfless than just me doing something for myself. And so, I mean, I wear it with pride. It used to be much more, like I said, just a visible thing that I got used to not knowing, because I was always like, this is John, he has MS, or this is John, my disabled friend, or this is, and it's been most of my life that I've had MS longer than I've not had it. And so, and MS affects everyone differently, and what causes it is different. So not everyone with it is the same, like same path with it, because it's more like MS is a symptom itself of something else. And like the New England area, I think your guys is more related to Lyme disease, the prevalence of that, and undiagnosed Lyme disease. And so mine is a vascular form of MS, and so its path is different, the systems it affects are different. And so it's, if I can just bring a little bit of awareness to it, then that's good. And how I've managed it so far. So.
Well, thank you, John. I feel like you shared with me something about how like you like running every day helps you kind of manage your conditions better. And I think you talked about that a little bit, but I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit, like that kind of helps you.
Yeah. Well, it's like MS is, you're losing the neural pathways to the connective nerve tissue in your nervous system, degenerating from myelin sheath that fades and your body attacks itself. And so basically mine's more like little tiny ischemic strokes that attack the the microvascular system in my body. So it affects my heart, my kidneys, my brain, my spinal cord. Let's just say. And so if I don't keep up like a training, so mine always started with walking. Just how far can I, if something was in 2 miles of me, I would walk to it. I'd walk to the store, I'd walk to the park, I'd walk to whatever, and then walk home. I'd walk to the 6 miles to get a potato, you know, and then walk 3 miles to get the potato and 3 miles home. So a little out and back to get a potato. And it became like little tasks like that. And then, like, you know, 6 miles becomes 10 miles, becomes 20 miles, becomes like a backpack full of rocks, because it's like I started hitting a plateau like with training, but I never pushed it, because at that point I was focused more on like aesthetics, and I just wanted to look healthy, but I didn't really care about performing, because I didn't think I would ever be able to perform. I thought like, okay, this is good enough. And trail running, like kind of like the first trail run I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not at all where I thought I was. And that was like a 25K. And then that's what started me down this path. But if I take, like, back when I was walking, if I would take just like 2 days off from, like, let's say a couple mile walk, I would have a bad gait the next day. Like I would start to get foot drop again and start to trip on just little things. And so it became like, I have to do this every day. And so then it became hiking at least 6 miles a day with a weighted vest. And I did that for years. And I, like, to the point where I can ask, like, people that know me, I eat the same meal, cook the same way at the same time every day for years. Like, I'm so scared to step outside of my little finite health that I have. And so, like, with everything, I just stick to like the repeat. And I'm able to do that because I was diagnosed so young. I've been permanently disabled by Social Security since I was 24. Because I couldn't manage, like, I finished graduate school, and then when it came to like working, I couldn't manage school, work, and then health. Health became my full-time job. Staying able-bodied became like all I had. That's all my life is. It's just exercising. And so it's like, yeah, you may know me at a race, you may know me outside on the trail, but the majority of my time is sitting there resting at home because I'm so whipped, I'm so exhausted. Like, it's to do anything more than what I'm doing is kind of like, I've already hit that wall. And so once I started doing the ultras, I've managed, it's kind of changed a lot, especially with diet, because it's limited resources on the trail of what you can eat. And so that was a little hard, but just trying to stick with it. And I found that like 50Ks, like try to do a bunch of those, like back-to-back weekends of 50Ks is kind of like, well, it's not financially able to do too long, but it does keep your training level at where it needs to be, because I'm so scared to take that rest day. Or like, you did a 100-miler, and the weekend before you did a 50-miler, and it's so at the end of the 100-miler, I did a 50K, you know, just that next Friday, just to keep it up, because I'm so scared that I'd rather just deal with soreness and blisters than like losing that strength or that pathway. And so yeah, I don't take a rest day. I've never heard of her. It's just, maybe I'll row. But then I still have to walk the dog. So it's like, I'm on the trail anyways, even if it's a rest day. And that's one thing, like, family and friends are always like, you need to rest, but I'm scared to rest. I'm scared to take that break.
Well, and it's so interesting to me to hear your approach, even in terms of, like, we think of the training that they tell you, and like making sure that your muscles like rest and recover and absorb the training and all of that. And yet you have to have a different approach because of the MS. Like, that's really just kind of fascinating to hear.
Yeah.
So,
but that's all I know. So it's not foreign to me. It just works for me. Like, it sounds weird to me that people need to take the break. Like, I'm just terrified of it. I wouldn't know what that means. Like, you're just gonna rest, like, you're not gonna go back on the trail. But I understand. Like, I have a friend who's very close to me, and it's like he has no training in between races. It's just like Monday through Friday work, and then rest on the weekends, and then out of nowhere go bust out a 100-miler. Like, didn't even have a training before it, you know. And that to me is like, how do you even accomplish that? Like, I have to keep that up and just keep that momentum moving. So that's why I signed up for those for next year. I have all my races planned for next year already. Like the rest of this year, I have a bunch of races signed up, and then next year I already have those all signed up for. So I need to have that like outlook for the future to keep it going. So.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Amy, I just wanted to like pick on something that John said, I think is so important. And it like, it melds. So I'm also a psychologist. And so I also love that Vermont Adaptive supports those with and I specialize in PTSD. And so I think I love that piece too, but just something, John, you said about visible versus invisible disabilities. And I think that's so important because that is kind of, you know, part of this world of athletes with disabilities, that there's that kind of those two groups, and there's challenges on both sides. And I think, you know, approaching someone with just wanting to know their story can be so helpful, because a lot of individuals who live with anxiety, depression, PTSD, et cetera, have that invisible disability. You know, and for me, mine's definitely invisible. People have no idea, or I'll say like, well, I can't see. They're like, oh yeah, no, I know I'm blind too. You know, so I think there's this piece that it's so important for us as humans just to want to know more about other people, and kind of, you know, just remove that invisibility, you know, and bring it to the forefront. So.
Thank you. I don't know if there's questions from the audience, and certainly if you guys have questions, you're welcome to throw them into the Q&A, and Alex will chime on in. I'd love for you guys, I don't know if any of you guys are going to be using guides or different, like, I guess, any sort of support throughout the race, but I'm just kind of curious, like, what your support looks like for the Vermont 100 this year.
I can tell you, I am running with 4 guides total, which would be great. Brian Rusiecki is a saint, kicking off with a 50-mile commitment. That guy is amazing. And then my crew consists of about a 9-year-old who will probably eat most of the snacks, and then my wife, who will probably be yelling at a 9-year-old for most of it. Yeah.
So you're planning to use guides for the entire 100 miles? Okay.
Yes, I will say that, like, and Allison, if you're doing the same, I'm super excited, because the one thing that I found was that not doing it and hiding the fact that I couldn't see, and Kyle, again, throwing love to that guy, the guides save, you don't even realize how much energy you're exerting, especially in the dark times when that 4 a.m. kickoff starts, and you're trying to, all those headlamps are all over the place, and you just cannot see. And then you have this one person that can guide you through to the point where you do not need to pay as much mind. My wife is always commenting that she can always tell when I'm out, if I go running in the morning by myself, and the same thing, she's like, you come back tired, you know, you always come home exhausted, and you're not going out for big miles, you're just exhausted. And I think for me, running, having those guides going through the transitional periods from bright to dark, I can even close my eyes and just kind of follow, so that I'm not experiencing that exhaustion.
That's really helpful for me, because it's almost like you read my mind, Ben. I'm really have been going back and forth over the last couple of weeks about that first part, and having someone with me. I have 3 guides right now that are also my crew, so they're going to kind of switch in and out. My husband's probably going to take the bulk of it. But you know, I had been really going back and forth, but hearing you talk about that, I think is super beneficial, because you do exert a lot of energy, you know, just being able to navigate, and then you really have to hone in and focus on your running. And so I think, you know, that definitely gives me some food for thought. And I have amazing hot pink sweatshirts for my crew to wear, so I can find them when I come into aid station. So we might have to get some hot pink t-shirts, because usually it's a little bit cooler, but it might be quite hot that weekend. So yeah, I put them in hot pinks, and then I can find them when I come in quickly.
It's interesting. I think back to I think it was 2017 or 2018, which is when Jason Romero ran the Vermont 100, and he currently is the visually impaired course record holder for the 100-miler. And he chose to run at least most of the race without guides. He may have done the whole race. I can't quite recall, but I remember during the day, he was, he was thinking, I'm going to run it without guides, and just, I think he just kind of thought, okay, well, if I need to, I'll just kind of latch on to a runner near me and have them help me through a certain section. And I know after he finished, he wasn't quite prepared for how you can go from a super bright field to like dense forest that's like twilight. It's like you're in the middle of the day and you can go for super bright to like twilight. And I think he had retinitis pigmentosa, so he had like central vision but no exterior vision, and just his eyes didn't adjust quite as quickly. And it was one of those things where hindsight, he was like, yeah, maybe I should have had a guide with me even throughout the day for some of those sections, because at Vermont, you get such that contrast going in and out. So really interesting. John, I don't know, what does support at Vermont 100 look like for you?
I have a friend who's running it.
You have Solomon, right? Who's running
yeah.
it? Yes.
Yeah,
Is he going to be running with you, or are you guys both running independently?
Well, we're two different styles of runners. He's like, I'm gonna run really quick and then take a nap, and then run really quick and then take a nap, and I'm gonna like walk to the first aid station for sure. Because I have to get my heart rate up. It takes a very long time to get my heart rate up, so I'll get high blood pressure in my lungs because my heart doesn't match my breathing. But we'll see. I don't like pacers. I don't like crew, because I just get in my own head about thinking about what they are doing, and what, and then they're like, oh my gosh, you look horrible. And so then it's like, oh God, I know, but you're telling me that.
You need better crew if they're telling you that you look horrible.
Well, they're just
Normally,
worried
your
about
crew
me. Like,
lies
people,
to you, and they tell you that you look great, even when you're like puking up a storm.
Yeah, I just find when I'm with other people, I try to like match them and forget to run my own race, and so I just crewless and pacerless, and it's just gonna be what it's gonna be, because then I'm free to just run how I need to that day and not be concerned like, oh, my crew's at this station, oh, I need to find this. I'm not even gonna do a drop bag, because maybe other than like mile 50 with fresh shoes or socks, because I don't want to have to deal with, like, my brain can't handle that many things at once, especially if I'm like working out, like keeping a pace up, and like, and I'm stressed. I'll just not be able to make a decision. I could get frozen, like walking in to look at a Target trying to find laundry detergent. Sometimes it'll take me 2 hours because just the overwhelming selection, like I get brain fog and I'll just sit there and stare at everything. And so I'm scared about all of that. So as streamlined as I can make it to where I just have to focus on myself, and what my why is, then the better I'll be. But I've done every race without like a crew there or people there for the finish or anything, because it's just easier that way for me. And I'm from the West Coast, so no one really knows out there.
Gotcha.
But like I said, this Vermont race is going to be quite an achievement for me, just for a lot of different reasons. I have other 100-milers for this year, but it's much different. It'll be much different. Like, this one's challenging just because of the terrain, just because of the humidity. I mean, we were 108 yesterday, but no humidity. So, I mean, 100 degrees of humidity is going to wipe me out, because I tend to swell in humidity, and like the Bay Area humidity, and that's with no heat. So I can't wait to see what's going to happen out there.
I'm going to go to we've got a couple folks that threw some questions in the question and answer, if you guys don't mind. So one person asked, they said, John, like, it sounds like you don't use crutches anymore, but you did. This runner said, I recently transitioned to forearm crutches full time, and I'm just learning to run with them. So I don't know if you have any, I don't know if you ran when you said you used crutches when you were younger. Did you?
Yeah, I used the forearm.
Or do you have any advice?
I hiked with them.
Okay.
With the forearm, the type that attaches to your forearm, so they're kind of always there. You can move around. I never ran. I just, that would be very hard with the running. Kudos to you for that, because then you have to think about like constantly 2 more contact points other than your feet, and that would be very hard for me. That's why I don't even use poles, because I find when I use poles, I'm distracted by them, and then I get a limp again. I get a gait. I kind of fall back to old like muscle memory, and I'll start to drop my foot and trip more when I'm using trekking poles. But I mean that's quite an accomplishment for sure. I did hiking with the poles, with the forearm canes, but I never was brave enough to run then. But so I wish I had more to offer with that, other than just consistency and stay practicing with it, because you know they're not really an aid. They're going to be just an extension of your own body, you know, and they're there that's something to be running with them for sure. So
I know Nipmuc Dave is in the audience, and Dave, if you want to answer this question, I guess just raise your hand if you might want to chime in on this. Nipmuc Dave is one of our mobility impaired athletes that has finished. I think it was one of the, whatever, I cry at the finish line a lot, but he definitely brought me to tears when he did it. Dave, we're gonna, I guess, yes, I just pulled you in, and I think we can unmute you. There you go, Dave. Hi, welcome. Do you have any, anything you want to share or talking about running with crutches? I think I unmuted you. Are you there, Dave? Maybe, maybe not. Dave, can you hear us? Okay, maybe we'll give him another few minutes to do that. I'm going to jump to another question while we're trying to sort that out. That's too much technology. Somebody asked about, they were asking about headlamps. They said, I'm interested in useful adaptive technology that you guys use or might have access to. They say my spouse is blind and also a runner and backpacker. So didn't know about like the headlamps that you guys use, or if there's anything kind of special that you guys do with that. So Allison or Ben, I don't know if you want to chime in, or anybody from the audience that might have an answer.
Honestly, I put a headlamp on until I'm not near Amy, and then I take it off. I just don't like headlamps. They very much bother me. But that's just my own personal thing. It just makes it very hard to see.
Ben, you're fast enough that you can be like my husband, who at one point said, I don't like running by a headlamp. I think I'm just going to finish before the sun sets. I was like, okay, that's great. Not an option for most of us, but great.
Yeah, that's going to be Ben. It's going to do it.
I don't think that's
going to be Ben, right?
Unless Brian's carrying me. That's all I'm saying.
I've switched to a Kugala, which is a waist light. That for whatever reason, that angle and the brightness of it seemed to work better for me. I also just hate the headlamp. So, but I do still use, they don't work well for I'm a big backpacker hiker. They don't work well for that, at least in New England. It's because our trails here are just like rock steps. They're not really, we don't believe in switchbacks, and we don't believe in dirt trails. And so the stepping up with the Kugala on your waist doesn't work super well. So I do have to use a headlamp when I hike, but otherwise I've switched to that waist light, which seems to do a better job.
Yeah, and I hate headlamps because they give me a headache. And then the fact that like, because of your other runners and then your gait like shaking back and forth puts like shadows that keep like shifting, and then I end up like dodging shadows that aren't really there. And so I find that it makes it much harder to use the headlamp. I like to run in the dark because usually there's enough people with lights on that you can kind of see. Or if it's just by myself, I like the flashlight, just a simple flashlight, to be able to shine it to where I need to know where to go. Because if I don't have like control of it, I find that like that constant little bit of shadow that does this back and forth just can make me nauseated, can make me start to shift my gait to match it. And so like headlamps are lame for sure. Like I can't use them. And the Kagala is cool, but it's impossible to keep the battery pack on it because it just drains it so quickly. And then if you have it on dim, what's the point? So I don't think there's like a right or wrong answer with that. I mean, I wish I could just be like everyone else and just strap on that thing on your head, but I get that pressure point headache from it, like squeezing. And, I think it's especially when you're like a disabled athlete, whether it's mobility, whether it's visual, you have to just find the tool that works for you and how you're going to like apply it to the sport you're doing. There's not going to be a right or wrong answer because all of them are going to be wrong. It's just about which one you can like manage the best for what you're doing at that time.
I gotta say, I agree with John on the flashlight. That's been another thing that I've thrown in the bag, just as if I'm coming up on someone, so I don't, if I hear something, I can kind of point that at it. So I agree with that.
John, I sometimes I hate I get headaches with like headlamps and how tight they need to be. I think I've got the shape of my head or something. They like to slide down to my nose, so you got to keep them really tight. So I'll take a baseball hat and I'll flip it backwards, so you've got like the brim and then the top, and it kind of just holds the headlamp where it needs to be without it needing to be cranked down on your head. And that's at least how I've overcome that kind of pressure point on your forehead, but it might not work for everyone.
I just think that's the shape of your head, Amy.
I know I've got a weird shaped head. Apparently, it wants to fall to my nose at all times.
Oh.
I know. And Nipmuc Dave, did we get technology working yet? Can you say hello and see if we can hear you? No. Okay. Sorry, Dave. So Dave, I can try and connect you to the athletes that's asking questions about running with crutches, because I know Dave has run several races with arm crutches, including the Vermont 100, and has been very successful, but also took years to kind of develop how to do that without getting blisters and getting kind of the right technology happening. So he's super invested in that. So certainly would love to connect you two to have that conversation. We've got another question from the audience, which is, it says, each of you have come to a place where you are comfortable identifying as an athlete with disability for the Vermont 100. Obviously, for some of you guys, it took a little bit of time to get to the point where you want to check that box. What is one thing that the running and racing community can do to encourage more people with disabilities to self-identify earlier on and feel more comfortable? Like, what would you say to them, or how can you encourage people?
It doesn't define you at the end of the day. It's not like you're getting any special aid. You still have the same cutoff time. You're still going to get the same blisters. If anything, it makes it like even that much more something to be proud of, because at the end of the day, you're still running an ultra, whether it be 100K or 100-mile. Like, that's awesome. And to be able to come forward and just admit that you have whatever your disability is, it's just bringing awareness to it, and it's not something to be ashamed about, because there's so many people that are sick that will live in the shadows because they think that's what defines them. That one little trait is what should define their whole life, and it's not. You can be so much more. And
Ben or Allison, do you guys want to add to this?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that, because I think like some races, I find some races are terrified. I think some race directors are terrified of having athletes with disabilities because it goes against their marketing. Like, right, like it's supposed to be like the most difficult race of all time for all people, and then you have someone with a disability that comes in and like crushes or does very well or hits podium. Like, I think that there's a tidbit of a sense of like, well, how can it be that difficult if that guy did it, and instead of celebrating that athlete? So I think like there just has to be a bit more of like an acceptance and recognizing, like John was saying, like, hey man, it doesn't matter who you are. If you crush, and these 100 miles is still 100 miles, and And so I think, I don't know. I guess I still don't know how to answer it. I just really appreciate like Vermont 100 being one of those pinnacle races that people pay attention to, and having Vermont Adaptive connected to it, and having people talk about how difficult Vermont 100 is. I mean, I can never remember what the elevation gain is on that, but I think there it is, another Easter egg.
You are blind if you can't see that on the race website. I'm just saying.
Right out there.
But I do think it's one of those where like I think more races should find ways to not market against it, and I find that some races do not intend to do it, but they do market against having folks come out as being disabled. And I noticed in like some races that I've gone to since I've asked if I could have a guide, and they were like great, but they did not want to like publicize it. And I think like, why not? Like, who cares? I think that you gain more people coming to your event if you start to be more inclusive.
Yeah, along those same lines is just like talk about it. The more the community can talk about it and put it out there that, you know, there's all sorts of different abilities towing the line at every single race, and you know, just it doesn't have to define you. It's just another cool aspect of who you are. I ran 100 miles and I'm losing my sight. Like, it's just, they're not mutually exclusive. They just are together. And this, you know, just the more we can talk about it, I think is the better. The more the community can talk about it, the better.
You know, I'm going to jump back in. Like, I think one thing that really comes to mind is like, you know, I think kind of the fun part of Vermont Adaptive and Vermont 100 and having this kind of event and saying, hey, is I think the undertone and the unsaid truth of it is, hey, look, there's people that like John who may have this physical thing that you see, and then there might be people like Alice and myself who like you don't see it, but then all of a sudden you see it because we got like a little sign on us that says blind, or we have a guide right off the bat. But to me, that like, as I'm kind of sitting here, it's kind of fun to think like everybody has something. Nobody jumps into 100, with all the respect to every runner on this thing. Like, you didn't jump into 100 miles because like, why not? Like, everybody has something, and you're doing it because you're proving something to yourself, and or otherwise just go run a marathon like everybody else and get your medal and go home. But this is so you can get your belt buckle that nobody will ever see, and you will sign up for another one because of something. And I think that's kind of the fun of all this, is everybody with a disability, whether it's visual, like whether it's the same, like things like Allison and I, or John, everybody has something, whether somebody's overcoming addiction or somebody's dealing with some, like the veterans. I mean, how many times have I run into a vet who is overcoming so much and doing it through this really healthy, well, kind of healthy thing. But it's so cool. And I think that's the beauty of what's happening with Vermont, or what has happened with Vermont 100, Vermont Adaptive, that collaboration is to really say like, hey man, like get out here, leave it on the course, meet some people, and it forever will I go back to, and Allison, I know you've heard this one from Amy, like who would you run with as one of her icebreakers? And it always, every time I'm always like, geez, it's whoever I run with, because I love that truth and honesty that happens when you're on that trail, because all of a sudden somebody's like, oh, you can't see, oh, I was in Afghanistan, or I had this, and you're like, all of a sudden these two separate worlds can combine and you become equals on all levels, and then you become the most honest. I mean, Christ, I've had people share some crazy stuff and you're like, man, we don't even know each other, and forever are we bonded because of what happened on this trail. And I think that's the beauty of it all.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's all good answers. And you bring up that great point, Ben, where it's like, you know, I think Allison, you were using the term like visible versus invisible kind of disabilities. But as Ben was saying, like everyone approaches these sorts of things with there's something that you're kind of working through. Like a lot of us wouldn't do these extreme things if we weren't trying to overcome something, or maybe run away from something, or like there's a reason. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, to approach that start line with a bib on that, hey, this might be the thing that I'm overcoming, where someone, you know, like when I approach a start line, I don't have to wear a bib that says, hey, this is, you know, that advertise, hey, this is the thing that I'm overcoming. But you're right, at the end of the day, like we all have something that we're trying to kind of work through, or maybe multiple things, right? And it's, yeah.
Amy, you did something really cool on one run. You were with a group of us, and you had us take a bib, flip it over, and write like what our
We
thing
all
was.
wrote what we were overcoming. This was an exercise that I did with people that were fundraising, and we each took a race bib and we flipped it over, and we each put like kind of the thing that we were overcoming by running the 100-miler, and we wore the bib. And it was more of an experience of these athletes, these adaptive athletes. At times it's very visible what they're overcoming, and yet the rest of us, it's maybe a little more invisible. And so we all ran kind of a 20-mile run with a bib on that said, this is what I'm overcoming. And whether we talked about it with each other or not, it was out there, and just kind of experiencing a car driving by that could read it, or your fellow runner that could read what that thing, that very personal thing was that you were overcoming, just kind of experiencing what that felt like. It was a really interesting thing to go through. So yeah, we did that on a run. So another question for all of you guys is just, I know I get from a lot of athletes, they want to be supportive of all of you guys. They want to be helpful. You know, maybe they want to learn how to be a guide or that sort of thing. Like, what are some ways if people want to be more supportive of you, want to encourage you, want to learn how to guide, any of those things? Like, how can they do that? How can they be the best support system to you?
I would say just start talking. I mean, that's kind of the big thing, is that break that hurdle of just asking. I think people get nervous of like, what do I do? Like, trust me, I'll be selfish and tell you exactly what the hell I need. I'm there to do that thing, and I think it's so cool when people actually have interest to help others. I just think that's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, just curiosity is always the word I use. Like, just be, you know, like Ben saying, just ask questions and talk about it. How can I be helpful? Some of my good friends obviously know, most of my good friends know, you know, what I manage and what I deal with. And so if we're out at a restaurant, or we're like, I especially hate restaurants that only have the menu up on the wall and they don't have a version that's closer. It's like awful. And so they'll say, do you need me to read something to you? Even my kids are doing that now. And so that's helpful to ask instead of just assuming that I do need help. I think I always appreciate someone saying, how can I be helpful, or is this helpful? You know, I think that's always, you know, something that I appreciate.
John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just not being afraid of it. Just like they were saying, just communicate, ask questions if you have them. I got questions for you, you know, like it goes both ways. But like on the course, I would say, don't be polite, don't be courteous, be predictable, you know, because sometimes that can just get in the way a little bit. Just treat us like we're just like any other athlete out there running. You don't need to do anything special, because if it helps us, like helps me at least, to not have someone who's like going out of the way to try to be polite or try to be accommodating, when it's like, just run your own race. I'm running my own race, you know, but we all have our own way of dealing with it.
I'm going to ask the question that's maybe kryptonite, but I think I've had some friends who are, you know, athletes with disabilities, and I've guided them before, and every single runner that's passing us, you know, like we're at like mile 5, and people are like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, you're an inspiration, and that sort of thing. I'm curious what you would say to that. Like, I get that people are well-intentioned with that sort of thought, but.
Well, everyone out there doing it is inspirational. Everyone I've met is inspirational on doing these ultras. Everyone's story, why they're doing it, just accomplishing it. So like, I think, you know, for myself and the other adaptive runners out there, this is our baseline. This is our perspective. Like, we're not doing anything that's extraordinary. We're just running a 100-mile race with just as you are, just as the fellow runner is. So it's kind of like a little bit like, I don't know, for me, it's nice to hear, but I don't like it. It's just distracting almost, because we're all there doing it. And it does make me feel a little bit more like, oh, woe is you, when there's just so like, oh, you're inspirational. You're inspirational. We all are. Like, I don't have any other option to, what am I going to do? Sit at home and feel sorry for myself? Like, what am I going to do? Not be out living my life, you know? So it's just from that point of view, I get it and I appreciate it, but sometimes it can be more of like a hindrance, because like I said, you don't need to be polite. You don't need to be encouraging. Like, just be friendly, be predictable, like another runner out there. If we end up running together and we talk and connect, just like you're saying, like you have the greatest bonds with complete strangers out there sometimes, but it doesn't need to be forced. It doesn't need to be like a charity case, because we're out there proving otherwise, you know.
Thanks, John. I don't know if Allison or John, you want to chime in on that?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really, I'll tell you this, if I look like, just tell me I look good. I mean, I don't care. I can't see. So just tell me how good I look and how beautiful I am and all that jazz. And that's what I'm at.
We'll do that for you, Ben. No problem. We got it covered. Yeah, no. Even at mile 87. I love that answer, John. I love the fact that if you're out on that course, like, everyone out there is crushing it. I mean, if you just make that decision to toe that line, I don't care what your varying abilities are. I think you are an inspiration. So I think I just love that answer. I agree. Absolutely.
Thanks. Excellent. No, I appreciate you guys. I'm going to give one last call for anybody that has from the audience that has a question that they want to ask. Either throw it in the question and answer, or you can throw it in the chat. I'm going to give it like a 3, 2, 1. No. Okay. And I don't know if anyone has any questions for Kim. Kim just kind of showed her camera again, but if anyone has any questions about Vermont Adaptive that they want to throw in there, again, you can throw it in the question and answer or throw it in the chat as well.
Can I just say something about Vermont Adaptive?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think Vermont Adaptive is the most underrated thing in the entire world. If you haven't started bidding on their silent auction, shame on you. It's the greatest thing.
Didn't that close like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, but I'm saying for like
next. But like, I mean, whatever.
There's always somebody that beats me on some of this stuff and drives me nuts. But it's the coolest program. I've gotten if anybody's been on this thing before, and I have a friend whose daughter has Usher's disease, so she was born deaf and she's losing her vision. In Vermont Adaptive, we all went up skiing up at Sugar Bush, not Pico, Easter egg number 3, and
Pico.
And he doesn't even know. It doesn't matter, Kim.
And it was the greatest time that my buddy, I mean, Ben and I, and Amy knows Ben and I still go running, and it was like last week, and he was like, man, that was still so cool, and my daughter still can't stop talking about it. It's one of the greatest things what Vermont Adaptive does for any person who is eligible for it. Is insane. Like, you can't even put words. It's freeing. It normalizes folks who are oftentimes like the last question, like, you're inspirational. Great. I'm just trying to get down this hill, like, and have some experience in life that is, quote, normal. So everything that goes to Vermont Adaptive is not enough. What they're doing is insane. And I'm so thankful. My wife and my family, we all got our Vermont Adaptive gear because we're so proud of it. And I consistently bring up Vermont Adaptive to every person I know. So I love you guys over there.
And Ben was not paid for that endorsement, but thank you.
I rode home with Ben after the first time he skied with Vermont Adaptive, and it was amazing, just kind of the smile on his face. And I think the important thing was like, prior to participating with Vermont Adaptive, he always had to ski down to his like son's level. And it was the first time that he was able to ski to his ability, you know, and that's the same thing with like the, you know, Allison and Ben and John and all the athletes with disabilities, like getting a guide out there or getting the support systems. It just allows you to be the amazing athlete that you are and not be held back because you can't see. Like instead you get the guides and they allow you to run as fast as you can. And, you know, it was
It's funny, John gave a good example, and it immediately made me think of skiing, because folks will see somebody crushing it in a mono ski, right? Well, they're just crushing it. They're like a phenomenal skier and they're just crushing it. Doesn't matter what piece of equipment they use. Like, I wouldn't do that regardless if I'm able-bodied or have a disability. Like, to me, all of you guys on this call and the audience, like, you're all nuts. Like, what are you doing running 100 miles, right? So to me, I think that's the message, that the more people can talk about it is being able to break down those barriers so that anybody can get out and recreate at whatever level. If you want to just be able to go with your family, that's fantastic. If you have goals and you want to set, you know, challenges for yourself to be an ultra runner or make the Paralympic team or whatever, there are pathways to all of that. And I think the more we can get the word out that anybody can do whatever their journey might be, whatever they want for whatever reason, it's doable. We just have to adapt some things and off we go.
well, unless Nipmuc Dave, can you talk yet? Like, unless Dave can talk yet. I don't see any other questions.
Amy, I did see one other in there.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how to answer that one that's remaining.
Okay.
And this runner, just to be clear, so these guys are asking, how would you categorize some of the athletes, or how would you like to see the athletes with disabilities category grow? And they're talking about having type 1 diabetes and wondering if that can count as a disability, or just kind of like how this can continue to expand. And I guess the only answer that I can say is just like, certainly we're looking to continue to expand. I don't quite know the answer for how, like, say, type 1 diabetes might fit in with this, but I'm open, like, I'm willing to have the conversation. So if the person that typed that in wants to reach out to me and just kind of have a conversation on how we can, you know, include other things, I'm certainly willing to have that conversation. A lot of this is just us trying to understand how we can include and incorporate and acknowledge as many things as possible and get you guys, you know, out there and running and support you in the ways, you know, a lot of the athletes with disability categories is just finding ways to just say, okay, if someone's like, say, visually impaired, they might need some additional support to be able to succeed in the way that an able-bodied runner does, or someone with full vision does. And so all it is just putting systems in place to allow them to have the support that makes them able to run, to succeed like everyone else. And, you know, and the same with the mobility impaired division. And so I'm open to conversations on how we can continue to open that to other disabilities that might want to be seen like that. Alex, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say to build on that, you know, because I think with the question, the way at least I read it was just generally like that athletes with disabilities category, whether at Vermont, other races, you know, like what you guys as athletes would like to see from that, what you have seen and what you'd like to see, I guess. That was the really interesting part to me, because I think, you know, it's early and there's a lot of room to grow everywhere.
And I guess if no one's chiming in on that, I will just say, like, part of this, like, as with a lot of things, I think it's really important to know that, like, this is an evolution. This is not an end point, and the conversation continues, and that we're, you know, at Vermont 100 and at the other races that I direct, we're certainly super open to having these conversations and understanding how we can make the trails accessible for as many people as possible.
The one thing I did appreciate about, like, with your race with the Vermont 100 was the lottery bypass, because there is so much interest in doing this race that I'm able to do it now this year, but that's not promised for the future. Like my fellow runners, their disease with their eyes could progress even more. And then my disease can progress and I'm not able to do it. So that lottery bypass is probably one of the nicest treats about it, on top of the acknowledgement of an athlete with disability, because it gives me the ability to actually conquer something without, you know, with the chance to be able to do it when I can do it.
Yeah.
And then with the diabetes comment, I was just sweeping at Tahoe 200 this last weekend, and I did the last section of the course, last 21 miles of the course. And there was the gentleman who finished, and he had type 1 diabetes, and he was just all the encouragement going through it. And he just crushed 201 miles, you know, 46,000 feet gain. And it was just awesome to see him finish it, you know, at the end. And so everyone's, no matter what your trial presented in front of you is, that's what's so awesome about this sport, is that you can do it. If you have that why in you, if you have that will in you, you're gonna get it done. And that's the most important thing, is to remember. So.
And what John is referring to for anyone that's watching is, you know, when we have the registration for the race, there are certain criteria that allows you to sign up before the lottery. So basically have a guaranteed spot. And one of those criteria is any athlete that qualifies for the Athletes with Disabilities division. And again, that's because we really want to make sure that as many athletes with disabilities are towing the line. So anybody who's watching this that qualifies, certainly you just have to email me ahead of the lottery and just say, hey, here's how I qualify, just like John did. I think you kind of let it slip. You didn't even mean, but I was like, hey, you qualify, you're in now.
It's like the day of, I was like, oh, by the way, does this work?
So, anyway, with seeing, I guess, no other questions, I again just want to, you know, thank the panelists for sharing their stories and sharing so openly. I think there's a lot of questions that I know, at least I get as someone who guides from time to time. So I appreciate you guys being willing and open to share your story. And I'm really excited to watch each of you guys toe the line and crush it this year at Vermont 100. And thanks you guys from the audience for joining us and for listening in and for throwing in questions and stuff like that. And certainly Kim from Vermont Adaptive. Again, we appreciate the partnership and everything you guys bring, but also I appreciate you talking a little bit about Vermont Adaptive. And again, you know, we'll be pushing this out to everyone, but we're going to make that push over the next week on the cusp of this to try to fundraise enough for a monoski and a hand crank cycle for Vermont Adaptive to, again, continue to allow them to be supporting as many athletes as possible. So, yeah, with that, I will, if I can figure it out, I will end the recording, and thanks guys for joining.
Well, thank you for the platform, Amy. It's great.
Thank you all for sharing your